for weight will be the what? So he calls it out, the silver shekel. This tax you must give to the prince. All the people of Israel must join the prince in bringing their offerings using what? The silver shekel, okay? And folks, what's going on here? We see the Bible clearly predicted that in the future temple sacrifices, the people of Israel, they wouldn't just be paying their taxes. God throws out a specific bone. What's he say? You are specifically going to pay these taxes. In what? Currency. In a shekel, right? But the problem is, folks, if you know your history, Israel's currency was not the shekel. It was the British pound until 1980. That's how recent it is. Until it just happened to be changed into the shekel, and which is being used on up to this very day. And just a couple weeks ago, or a couple days ago, I just read an article, the shekel's doing great against the low dollar in there. We're in the last days. Wake up. But that's still not all, folks. God is very, very precise. The sixth end time prophecy concerning the Jewish people, get this, is you would blossom as a rose in the desert. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I've really been refraining from growing a garden, even though we got a good patch in the backyard. I mean, guys, I don't even have a green, the green thumb? I got the brown finger. I can't grow nothing. You know what I'm saying? But imagine me trying to grow something in the desert. God said, wake up when you see the flowers taken off in the desert. When Israel comes back. Your redemption is drawing near. Let's take a look at that passage. Very specific in here. Isaiah 35 verse 1 through 2 says this. But even the wilderness will rejoice in those days. The desert will what? Blossom with flowers. Yes, there will be an abundance of flowers. Not just some, but an abundance of flowers. And singing and joy. The deserts will become as green as the mountains of Lebanon. As lovely as Mount Carmel's pastures. And the plain of Sharon or Sharon. There the Lord will display His glory and the splendor of our God. Folks, according to the Bible, it's very obvious in the last days, one of the signs is all of a sudden you're going to see a lot of, specifically, flowers take off in the desert. But here's the problem, if you know your history. When Mark Twain visited Israel in the 1860s, he reported that Israel was a complete, barren wasteland, absolutely desert, no trees, nothing. It was wiped out. And the reason why was because almost 2,000 years of foreign conquerors had totally abused the land and had made it into a wasteland. But it just so happened when the Jews began to return, they didn't just return, they started building a network of irrigation systems. And right now, partly because of a massive tree replanting program, there are over 400 million trees in Israel. It's increased the rainfall by 450%. In fact, Israel, the former desert, has now become the breadbasket of the Middle East. And they're actually not just exporting fruit from the desert, they're exporting it all over the world. In fact, Israel diverted the water from the Sea of Galilee, get this, and channeled it through the sections of guess where? The desert, right now today, which have allowed the deserts to literally blossom with an abundance of flowers. Even to the point, get this, Israel, now the former desert, has now become a major world exporter of guess what? Flowers and ornamental plants. The Bible said when? When you are in the last days. But that's still a seventh end time prophecy concerning the Jewish people. Is one day they would have a powerful military. Do they have one? Slightly. Listen to this. God said, here, wake up when you see this. Your redemption's coming near. Zechariah 12:6 says this. On that day, I will make, God speak, I will make the leaders of Judah like a fire pot in a wood file. Crone translation, how many men got a barbecue and you put way too much of the fluid on there? Okay, that's kind of what God's going to do with Israel. Okay, that's it. Anyway, like a flaming torch among sheaves, they will consume Israel, will consume right and left all the surrounding peoples, but Jerusalem will remain intact in her place. Crone translation, don't mess with Israel. You're messing with God. But that's not all what I want to bring out. Folks, outnumbered, against all odds. If you know the history of Israel when they got back in the land, Israeli forces have astounded the world by their victories over and over and over again during 6 wars. For instance, folks, within hours of Israel's declaration of independence, get this, Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, Lebanon, all immediately invaded Israel. The combined population of those countries at that time was about 20 million people, yet Israel had maybe, not even, almost 1 million people. The odds were 20-1. But when all was said and done, the Jewish people didn't just win the war, they totally spanked them. I had one of my teachers in seminary, he was actually there in the 67 war, I believe. He saw with his own eyes. He said they were completely, I was there. I was hiding behind the sand with the camera. He said, it was weird. It was something, he said, you could feel it spiritual was going on. Israel might have 1 tank and here comes 6 at them. when the dust cleared, they were still there, and the other tanks were gone. Time after time after time after again. But what is going on, folks? They not just won that war, the first one, but they expanded their size of Israel by 50%. And wake up, pay attention to the prophecy. Right now today, Israel has one of the most powerful military forces in the world with full nuclear capabilities. Hands down, they're the most powerful military influence in the region, just like the Bible said, when you are in the last days. But that's still all. The next one concerning the Jewish people is they become a center of world conflict. Do we see that? Wake up, folks. Every time you turn on the news, you're watching this unfold before your very eyes. Zechariah, verse 12, 2 and 3 says this, I am going to make Jerusalem a cup that sends all the surrounding peoples reeling. Judah will be besieged as well as Jerusalem. And on that day when the nations of the world's going to turn against Israel. Are people starting to do that? He says, on that day when the nations of the earth are gathered against her, I will make Jerusalem an immovable rock to all the nations, and all who try to move it will actually injure themselves. People of God, again, as we already said in 1948, when the Jewish people became that nation, within hours, the nations around them have declared war against Israel, and the fighting has never stopped. It also just so happens that Israel happens to be at one of the most strategic, significant points in the country for the world's oil reserves. Then to make matters even worse, Israel happens to be the headquarters of the world's 3 largest religions. And that's why you and I can turn on the newspaper, read the newspaper, turn on the TV every single day and see that Israel has indeed, tiny little Israel, you can fit 17 of them in the state of California, has become a center of what? World conflict, an international problem, just like the Bible said. When you're in the last days. The 9th and final sign of the Jewish people, knowing you are in the last days, is when you saw the people doing what? When they would rebuild a temple. Wake up, folks, this is happening right now. Revelation 11, verse 2 says this, leave out, during the tribulation is the context. This is during the tribulation, pay attention. Leave out the court which is outside the what? The temple, okay? And do not measure it, for it has been given to the nations, and they will tread underfoot the holy city, Jerusalem, defined by the context, for 42 months. Now, folks, again, according to the Bible, according to the book of Revelation specifically, it clearly reveals that there will be a Jewish temple during the time of the tribulation, right? Okay, but the only problem is the temple was destroyed back in 70 AD. Okay? But gee whiz, can anybody guess just who happens to be preparing to build another temple right now? The Jewish people. But the problem is the Muslim Dome of the Rock is sitting right where many believe that the new temple needs to be, and so there's a conflict. And folks, that's why you got to wake up. It isn't just a land issue. This is why there's such strife in Israel. It's not just a land issue, it's a spiritual issue. But strife or not, the Bible is clear. One day, the end times temple will be rebuilt. In fact, many scholars believe it's going to possibly occur as a result of a peace treaty. Where's everybody wanting to make peace treaties? Of a peace treaty with the Antichrist himself, which is a single prophetic event that starts the 7-year tribulation. Daniel 9:27 says he, that's the Antichrist, will make a treaty with the people, the Jewish people, for a period of one set of 7. That's 7 years. He's fulfilling Daniel's 70th week prophecy. We've gone through 69. There's 1 to go. That's the 7-year tribulation. But after this time, half this time, he, the Antichrist, will put an end to the sacrifices and offering. Paul tells us that's when the Antichrist goes up into this newly built temple. He declares himself to be God, and he seeks then to annihilate 2/3 of the Jewish people. Folks, according to the Bible, if you read it, folks, we see that the specific event that starts with the 7-year tribulation is when the Antichrist doesn't just make a treaty, he makes a treaty with who? The Jewish people. And folks, can anybody guess where in the world, the whole world, has been for several years trying to make a treaty with? Wake up, people, it's Israel. And that means, guess what? One of these proposed treaties that our minds have become so numb to, one of them, folks, is going to be with the Antichrist. And it'll be the single event that starts the tribulation. It's happening now. And many feel that the Antichrist, with his fabulous charisma and his false miracles, is going to be the only one to convince Israel to give up more land. Is that happening? Yeah. And then he's going to use that as a barter tool, a carrot, to get them the permission to rebuild this temple. But get this. It just so happens, folks, that right now, even if they don't get permission to rebuild the temple on the Dome of the Rock, get this, Jewish archaeologists right now today are believing that it could actually be in